Forecast News in conversation with Vitalik Buterin. He's co-founder of Ethereum. And welcome to this conversation, Vitalik. I'm editor-in-chief Angie Lau. You're here in Hong Kong. You're a world traveler. And really your home is wherever you are. And a lot of people are asking about what's the status of Ethereum? So you were just in Shenzhen. What are the conversations that you're having in China?
I mean, the conversations that I've been having everywhere. I've been kind of on this Asia tour for the last month or so, have been very positive, and a lot of things, I mean, in the same direction. I think the big things that have been happening recently is just that, I mean, first of all, there's all of this progress with some of the scaling technologies that we've been having for the last couple of months. And scaling is a problem we've been talking about for 5 years, building things for many years, and a lot of the work is finally starting to come to fruition. So, for example, there was this platform called Optimistic Rollup. It's kind of a scaling solution on Ethereum. It's much simpler than things like Plasma or the Lightning Network or like some of the other fancier things, but it gives you like over 1,000 transactions a second, and that's running now. So, like, on the technical side, there's a lot of things like that that are kind of really starting to come out like right now. On the business side, I think public chains are being perceived as kind of much more legitimate than before, including in enterprise and like everywhere. Like this is something that like I've heard in China. It's something I've heard in Korea, like DEF CON, even just looking at the kinds of applications that people are building, looking at things like the Santander Bank launching bonds on the public Ethereum chain, and IKEA using some Ethereum blockchain-based token to pay for things. So it's, I think public chains in general have been going through this kind of reawakening very recently, and I think part of that is just people see the promise of blockchains and people are excited about it. And at the beginning, I think people were kind of more conservative and they said, oh, we need these kind of semi-centralized permission chains. But then I think more recently we've been seeing a lot of those projects kind of not come to pass, and people have been realizing that like, wait, maybe using the existing public chains actually is the conservative thing. And and there's been an interesting shift around that.
And that shift is something that you're supporting on the technical side. A lot of people say that scalability and stability need to be really established before dApps and developers really come on board and create applications for people like you and me and everybody else out there going, okay, this is a practical use of that. But how are, on the back end of it, how is Ethereum ETH2 establishing itself, and how, there's a lot of concern about the forking. Is that a concern that you have?
So I guess from a technical point of view, we've had this kind of big workshop in Toronto about 1.5 months ago, where we got all of the different teams building ETH2 implementations to talk to each other and kind of speak the same protocol. And we're coming very close to having public test networks, which is basically the last step before launching a public main network. So things are really kind of full steam ahead and moving forward quite quickly now. So of course, the way that ETH2 kind of will be rolled out is that it starts off being a separate ETH2 chain, and then there's a link between the two chains, and then eventually the kind of existing Ethereum chain gets kind of fully merged into the ETH2 chain, but it's definitely this kind of multi-stage process. And the reason we did this is to kind of be more safe and conservative, right? Like, you don't want to move the entire existing ecosystem onto the fancy new thing before you've proved that the fancy new thing can work. And the fancy new thing here includes proof of stake, so it's not just a technology change, it's also an economics change, and that's not really something that you can test in the lab. And so, like, we need to have some way of like actually having it run in real life, while at the same time not having applications like all depend on it from day one, right?
Yeah.
So like having
You don't want to stress out the system like a CryptoKitty.
yeah, exactly. Like so like having the two kind of the established thing and the experimental thing kind of run at the same time, kind of with bridges between them, but like still running at the same time, like basically is the safest way to launch the whole thing.
And so back to your point about public chains and truly decentralized, truly public, gaining more credibility. How much is governance a part of that? And how much are you be involved in really kind of leading? A lot of people trust what you've built and what the community has built. Like governance is still a very critical issue.
Yes. So governance is definitely like something that we have to kind of keep doing and keep, especially as we're taking the blockchain through this kind of very unprecedented live transition.
Yeah.
It's basically like upgrading an airplane in mid-flight in some ways. And
Not necessarily the safest exercise, but that's how quickly this industry is moving.
yeah, exactly. It's like something that it needs to be done. Like the space, the technology in the space is still very far from being at the level it needs to be to fully support the industry, and like, we're trying to take it there. So, it's definitely something that requires kind of broad consent and collaboration across the Ethereum ecosystem, and I feel like we've been very actively engaging with the community. We have developer communities and application developer communities that we've been interacting with very closely for that, and it is a process that I think is happening kind of very publicly and very transparently, and like obviously there are people that are kind of unhappy with the direction, but I think like people who think that proof of stake and sharding are good ideas in principle are kind of happy with how we've been doing things, and people that are like don't think that proof of stake and sharding are good ideas in principle, like most of them are not even kind of part of the Ethereum ecosystem now, because look, we've been talking about proof of stake and sharding for years. It's not like some new thing that we're kind of springing on people without expectation, right? And so like a lot of those people, for example, even moved over to Ethereum Classic like when the DAO fork happened in that chain, kind of got,
And that's the democratic. You can vote with your feet.
Exactly. Yeah, it's a democratic way.
Yeah. At the end of the day, people are still taking a look at what blockchain enterprise solutions, applications are, and very famously, Gartner recently published its hype cycle. It said that blockchain is sliding into the trough of disillusionment.
Sliding into the trough or coming out of the trough?
Well,
I feel like it's on the right side of the trough of disillusionment now. Yeah, like I feel like the bottom was more like at the beginning of this year, and the bottom is over already.
What do you see in terms of applications? What's on the horizon that you're excited about most with ETH2? The things that it solves that makes better.
Yeah, so the main thing that ETH2 makes better is obviously scalability, and scalability is important because of the things that it enables, right? And which basically means like more of everything. The applications that we've generally seen on the blockchain so far generally have to do with finance, and there's good reasons for that, right? Because like existing centralized financial systems are kind of relatively terrible, and like there's definitely kind of specific cases where they can be very efficient, but like especially if you look at international markets, if you're trying to do anything kind of unconventional, like as soon as you kind of get outside the box a little, they start breaking down quickly, and like that's more obvious in finance than it is in kind of centralized services almost anywhere else.
I mean, look at Hong Kong, right?
Yeah.
I mean, this is a financial services hub.
Yeah.
There's a lot of multinationals that are here. And at the same time, there's a lot of discontent in the street. What's your perception of how blockchain can evolve into a society that possibly could return the power of the economy back to the individual, which is the promise of blockchain?
Yeah, so I think that some of these kind of blockchain-based financial applications are kind of very good at creating a kind of system where, I mean, more people can participate, but also very importantly, not just participate as kind of users or consumers and investors, but also participate as producers, and that's kind of an inherent property of the ecosystem, right? And I mean, there's times that it's kind of chaotic, and as we've even seen with things like ICOs, for example. But there's a lot of experimentation happening in creating newer and more participatory ways of starting projects, of creating kind of financial assets of different types. And
give me an example that excites you the most. Like right now in the real world, you take a look at that project and you're like, wow, that's really going to be impactful.
I mean, the smart contract insurance is one example. There's already pilots in places like Sri Lanka, for example, where what they basically do is they create smart contracts that talk to just oracles, data sources on the internet, and they just say if a hurricane happens, automatically make a payout over here. If there's no rain, automatically make a payout over there. And it's something that you can just make in 50 lines of code, and it works pretty well, and it seems to be starting to provide value to people.
Well, before I let you go, because I know that you are in demand, and we're here at the beautiful University of Chicago booth, with a crowd waiting to hear from you. Google just said it broke the quantum computing conundrum, and that really kind of makes a lot of people take a look at blockchain and suspect that it threatens the stability of blockchain. Your thoughts?
So there's a lot of misconceptions about the quantum computing in general and the Google quantum thing specifically. So I guess first of all, what the Google quantum announcement proved is that there exist quantum processes that we can create that are kind of more computationally complex than we can simulate on computers, right? So the equivalent of this would be hydrogen bombs as proof of concept for nuclear fusion energy, right? So it proves that the ability to make a big boom exists. What it does not prove is the ability to harness that big boom to create things that are useful. And for creating things that are useful, just as with nuclear fusion, I mean, we've had the bombs for 70 years, but making nuclear reactors that kind of calmly and peacefully give us free, really cheap power still hasn't happened yet. With quantum computers, there's also kind of structural reasons why we're still potentially over a decade away from kind of harnessing the quantum to do specific computations that we want. So that's the first thing, right? So the world is not going to break tomorrow. I mean, the second thing is that even when we create quantum computers that we can direct to create specific computations, it's not true that quantum computers break all cryptography, right? They break some cryptographic algorithms, but for every cryptographic algorithm that quantum computers can break, we know that we have a replacement, and sometimes the replacement is 5 times or 10 times less efficient, but we have a replacement that quantum computers cannot break. So we have an upgrade path, and we know what the upgrade path is.
There you go. And before we leave, this is Hong Kong, we're in the steppes of China, this is Asia. How are you feeling about the investor space here, the blockchain technology investment space here, the VC space?
There's a lot of people that are interested in both cryptocurrencies and blockchain technologies more generally, and I think Asia is definitely a kind of a major hub of investment in blockchain projects of all kinds, and there's a lot of people, a lot of money. The people are in many places rapidly getting more money, and so I think from an investment standpoint, it's very significant and going to be even more significant. And also over the last couple of years, I think the blockchain development here has been kind of accelerating. So About 5 years ago, there was kind of very little. It was just miners and exchanges. But now, I mean, even like here in Hong Kong, there's projects like Enuma, for example, that's doing layer 2 scaling on top of Ethereum. There's projects doing things with hardware. There's projects doing things around like, secure decentralized exchanges. So there's more and more things happening.
Vitalik, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Pleasure.
Mm-hmm.